Much better. There we go. Psyched you all out with the first one. Or maybe you didn't see the first one. Maybe you're just confused about what I'm talking about. It's part of a charging cable. You can't see that my desk is a mess, but my desk is a mess. All these Bibles and books. So really cool thing yesterday. I picked up this book, Searchlights from the Word by G. Campbell Morgan. And when I opened it up, inside, I know it's backwards for you, but I find the name Homer A. Kent, which is fascinating because he was my favorite commentator on the book of Hebrews. And so I'm having to ask myself if I ended up with one of his books. So, kind of hope so. That's kind of cool if I did. Okay, putting books down on the ground. Again, you can't see my little mini desk I use, but it's covered in stuff. So, all that said, shutting the door, let's do a Bible study. You all might need to invite friends if they went to my sneaky first Sideways live stream. We're in the Gospel of Matthew, and we've been working our way through the Sermon on the Mount, and we just finished the Judge Not section. And so now, we move on. Verse 7 says, "Ask it and it'll be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it'll be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. Or what man is there among you who, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will he give him a serpent? If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him?" Now, what we have here is God prompting us to ask. Watch this. I feel straighter now. God prompting us to ask. God prompting us to pray. You know, you can't really ask God for anything without praying, because that's what praying is, right? I mean, talking to God. That's when we talk to God, we're in prayer. And so here we have three verbs: ask, seek, and knock. All of them are in that imperfective, continually going on state, the verb, right? It's asking, seeking, knocking. And so it speaks of something we ought to continue doing, to be continually asking, seeking, and knocking. Now, asking is kind of a first step, right? We have to ask and just acknowledge what it is we want and then verbalize that. Seeking is then going a little bit further, where we're now going to put in some effort to try and find that which we asked for. And knocking is that place where we're really approaching and we are getting to that answer for prayer, and we're knocking. You know, we're there at the door. We see that parable that Jesus told of the neighbor who comes and knocks at the door in the middle of the night because he had guests show up unannounced and he had no bread. And so he's asking for bread. And the neighbor, "I don't want to get out of bed. My kids are in bed with me. We're tired." But he keeps knocking. And so the guy comes and opens the door. Now, Jesus told many parables about imperfect people and imperfect situations, but they were to help us understand about our perfect Father. And so God's not in bed. You see, a fortiori is a fancy Latin phrase for from the greater or from the stronger. And the idea is if this guy, this neighbor who's in bed with his kids, kind of ornery, doesn't want to get out of bed, if the unjust judge we read about and the persistent widow, right? If these people who are not perfect will answer the requests of these persistent people, the persistent widow and this persistent neighbor, if they'll do it, well, then how much more will our Father in heaven? And that's exactly the type of argument that Jesus gives here in verses 9, 10, and 11. What man among you who, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone, or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? And the idea is that we, if you then being evil, we being evil, I mean, we're in comparison to God, in contrast to him, I mean, well, I'm wicked compared to God, but if I know how to provide for my kids, if I know how to give good gifts to my children, well, then how much more? That's the a fortiori part. If the lesser will do this, then how much more will the greater? You know, in Luke, Jesus uses this same argument that a wicked father wouldn't give a stone for bread, or even a scorpion for an egg. There's all the, he gives a couple. It's a little bit different, but it mentions there actually how much more the Father gives the Holy Spirit to those who ask. But what we have here is God reminding us to be asking. Not only asking, but seeking. Not only seeking, but knocking, where we approach the door and we expect God to answer. But it only happens when we ask. Some of you listened to that Jim Cymbala message we shared a couple weeks ago now, or almost a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned, could you imagine the epitaph on your grave, the little saying on the gravestone? You had not because you asked not. Wouldn't that be sad? At the end of our life, we come to realize that we had not simply because we asked not. Throughout the Bible, we see promises about if we seek God, we will find him. David tells that to young Solomon. It's spoken through Jeremiah the prophet in Jeremiah 29. All throughout, James talks about it. Jesus talks about it. If we seek him, we will find him. If we ask, we will receive. And oftentimes it's simply that we ask not. Or maybe we asked, but we weren't willing to seek. Maybe we did a little seeking, but we never got to the point where we knocked. You don't knock on the door unless you assume you've found the door you're supposed to be going through, right? I mean, if you're in an apartment complex, you usually save that knocking until you think you've reached your destination, and by faith, you then act and knock. And that's part of this whole process, is seeking out what it is we're praying for. Not just shooting up a quick prayer, which can often be very effective and something we ought to do as well, but seeking it out. Asking God, seeking if there's a reason why our prayer is not answered. Asking God what his will is in our life, rather than so often spilling out to God what our desire for his will is in our life. And then stepping out in faith, believing that God will answer, where we knock. But we believe that God will give us good gift. and that every good and perfect gift comes from God, our Father in heaven, Father of lights, no shadow, no turning, right? So every good and perfect gift comes from him, which, it means that if it is actually good, it comes from him. And if it didn't come from him, then it's not good. Pretty straightforward. There's probably a lot of things we end up with that didn't really come from him, and we might think they're good, but they might not be as good as we think. In short, ask, seek, knock. Continually be seeking out the heart of your Father in heaven. Go after him and ask him for these things, and realize that if he doesn't give you what you asked for, it doesn't mean that he's not good. It just might mean what you asked for isn't good, and he's got something better in store, something better in mind. And so this is where we have to trust him. We have to trust him that if you, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your kids, well then, how much more should we trust him that our perfect Father in heaven knows what he's doing, knows how to give good gifts, knows when to withhold things that would not be a good gift, and that he's got a plan and he's sticking to it. And so, trusting God and believing and asking and seeking and knocking. There you guys go. All right. I will see you guys in the morning tomorrow, 7:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, just in case we have anyone from not around the West Coast. I'll see you guys then.